Hello, ERWC parents and families. My name is Christina Ray, and I am your student's ERWC teacher. Just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview for our virtual back to school night this term. So to start with just a little bit of background about me, I received the entirety of my higher education from the University of California at Davis, where I got my bachelor's degree in communications with minors in psychology and sociology, with a sociology of law emphasis in the African American experience in America. Whew, kind of a mouthful there. As often happens, I went into Davis with a different expectation of degree or of career than I came out with. Well, initially I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. That's a whole different story. Obviously, that's not where we ended up. And then when I switched to different things, I thought perhaps my two paths would be civil rights lawyer or social worker. And so kind of did some exploration there. My pursuing social work led me to working at a level 14 residential treatment facility in their non-public school, where I learned that perhaps social work, not so much for me. However, I did love working in education, and I particularly loved working with those high school age students. So that led to me going back to UC Davis to get my teaching credential. I stuck around for my master's degree, and it landed me eventually here at Vista. I have been teaching at Vista Del Lago. This is now my 7th year. I truly love this community, love working with these staff and with these students, with these families. So I'm just generally jazzed to be here. I also serve as the English division lead, in addition to one of the district's equity leads. I recently took on the position of cheer advisor, so I'm just eager and excited to get involved with all things Vista and be a member of this district. So super excited to be teaching your students as they embark in their senior year and helping them to close out their high school journey. When it comes to my classrooms, I feel like the most important thing is respect. I feel like it's so important that students first and foremost respect themselves. And so that comes with building agency for their own assignments, remembering that they can always come and speak to me, and that I will give them clear communication on what it is that they need to do or feedback for how they can improve. I provide an open and non-threatening classroom environment. We do quite a bit of classroom discussion in this course, and we are discussing things that are happening currently in our world and how they affect us and how that affects our voice as writers and the way that we can help develop our own rhetoric to reach our audience. And so it's so important that students have that open and non-threatening space to communicate with one another through that mutual respect, where they not only respect themselves, they respect each other. I respect them. It's just very important, I think, to the classroom culture, especially when it comes to English 12 ERWC, as we're really engaging in some interesting dialogue to help to increase our own worldviews. I will always give them clear expectations as well on all assignments. I truly believe that that's incredibly crucial to their own success, is that they know how they will be graded and what the expectations are for their learning. So anything that is graded summatively is accompanied by a rubric that breaks down each of the skills. And those rubrics are also shared with you on my website, which we'll be going over in a little bit here so you can see it. As far as grading and late work, our grades are weighted, as they are for all of the classes here at Vista. Since we are up in that senior year, getting ready to move on, our weight is a little bit higher than they've seen previously. So summative assessments do account for 90% of the grade. So summative assessments are final drafts, major tests. Sometimes summative assessments may be rewritten if all formative work is submitted, and if a student follows the summative revision procedures. And then those formative assessments, the classwork, the practice work, the tools for feedback, well, it's incredibly important when it comes to that feedback aspect. This is how they know where they are. They assess themselves. They see where they fall on that rubric, so that when they walk into that summative, they already really have a pretty clear idea of probably how they will do as far as performance goes. They know where they were. They know what they need to do to improve, to move up to that next level of the rubric band. So while those formative assessments only carry 10% of the weight, they don't affect the grade very heavily. They're incredibly crucial when it comes to the success because they're that feedback piece. When it comes to late work, I really discourage students from getting into the habit of submitting work late, especially since depending upon where they're going from here, whether it be college, a two-year college or university or into the workforce, late work is sometimes not accepted, period. We will accept it, and it will not be marked down for being late because it's really important to me that their grades reflect their learning and not their habits. But formative work does need to be submitted before the summative for consideration and feedback, because the purpose of that formative is to help for that summative. After that summative event has passed, the formative then loses its purpose. Summatives that are over a week late may not be accepted. In that case, we may create an alternative assessment that will assess those same skills or learning targets using that same rubric. So that will be kind of dependent student by student, but they're really encouraged not to get into the habit of submitting work late. And then I'll discuss with students on an individual case-by-case basis when it comes to that late work. That's when you start seeing students getting red checked into flex. As far as an overview of the course itself, it does focus on expository reading and writing. There are modules as opposed to units is what we call them. And there are some benefits as they relate to the UC system, CSU system, and California Community College system. So ERWC is a course that was developed, drafted, and written by the CSU system. Students who had tested conditionally ready on the EAP who pass ERWC with a C or better are now considered ready. So it gets them out of that remedial class that they may have had to take at the beginning of their college experience if that's where they're heading. So if they pass with that C or better, they no longer need to enroll in remedial English. So just kind of a nice benefit of ERWC, in addition to it just being, I think, a really engaging and relevant course. So our first unit, which we are in right now, is rhetorical analysis. We are critically analyzing speeches using a rhetorical lens, and that will end with a rhetorical analysis paragraph. So not only are they analyzing what it is that that text is doing and what that author is doing, so we have some of that reading piece, but then they are also presenting that through a written paragraph. So most of our modules have a reading piece as well as a writing piece. And so here they're rhetorically analyzing one specific strategy used by a speaker and how it is that that's building the appeal and speaking to their audience. From there, we move into language, gender, and culture, a short unit where we're going to do some descriptive outlining of a text, seeing how it is that authors organize their writing, develop their voice, looking at more traditional texts. So in this case, we will be looking at articles. So we go from speeches to then looking at articles. Next, we move into inquiry and research, which is a unit we just started last term. It was really successful. We get to seek out answers to our biggest questions, the questions we may have that can sometimes seem so daunting that they're just unanswerable, and engage in that inquiry process. Develop some guiding questions based upon that overarching question. Find really nice research-based sources that can help to answer those questions. We'll use the research database that we have access to through our FCUSD and Vista library accounts, and we will be creating an annotated bibliography for this unit. From there, we move into juvenile justice, a very high interest unit. It's a research-based argument. We'll really be examining the justice system as it relates specifically to the treatment of juveniles. So lots of discussion here, lots of cases that are currently happening right now, so real relevant. And students will be developing a research-based argument in the form of an outline. So think this outline could be turned into an essay, but we're not doing the essay quite yet. So we'll have that real nice detailed outline so we can look at how it is that we're organizing our work. We're integrating our evidence. We know what our analysis is going to look like. So a real nice high interest unit. And then we end our first chunk of time together with John Krakauer's Into the Wild, a wonderful book. I think it speaks really specifically to seniors as they are about to go off into their own wilds, whatever that might be for them, kind of this into the unknown and embracing something new. So John Krakauer's journalistic style writing is really interesting as it relates to following this story of Chris McCandless, who stepped into the Alaskan wilderness and never stepped out. And so we'll be reading this together, focusing on annotation and close reading strategies while we do some argumentative writing that looks specifically at a text and how an author is presenting a text. So a really high interest text that students typically really enjoy. We then move into some dystopian fiction with George Orwell's 1984, remains ever relevant, and we will be engaging in some literary analysis beginning to engage in this idea of looking at text through critical lenses. So getting some practice here and doing it as a full class. So this is a really fun unit. We read much of the text together, which is interesting. It's something I feel like we don't often do as we get into those higher levels of English classes in high school, but gives us an opportunity to really dig into that text together, look at what Orwell is doing, look at his argument and this idea of 1984 as a cautionary tale. So we dive into that text before we then let students have a little bit of agency when it comes to the text that they read. So this was a new unit last term, and we were a little nervous because kicking off something we hadn't done before in a distant space felt daunting, but I'm happy to report it was really successful. Students really, really enjoyed it. It was high engagement. We as teachers loved this unit, so we're looking forward to making a few minor adjustments based upon what we learned last time and diving back into literature circles. So students will be close reading through a critical lens, and then we'll be presenting their analysis through a creative kind of forum, whether it's a lit chat or a crash course or a podcast, and they'll be working in small teams to do this. So they'll get to choose from a variety of texts, including The Kite Runner, All Quiet on the Western Front, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, Things Fall Apart, Purple Hibiscus, Brave New World, and A Thousand Splendid Suns. Other ones that we have currently approved for them. Students also have the option to, in a small group, pitch a different text that we haven't already pulled for them. But a really nice way to kind of close out the year before we get to their final, which is a speech. So they end the year with a speech, which is kind of fitting because if you think way back when they were freshmen, so young, and they ended their freshman comp classes with speeches, they also end their senior journey with speeches. So they work at giving voice to the voiceless, inspired by something that they might have read in the text that they looked at for their literature circles, and taking into account everything they've learned about how it is that authors develop voice and effectively use rhetoric. They are going to do exactly those things, using their own voice to give the volume that might be needed to an issue that they see in their community, in their country, in their world, whatever it might be. They have the option to really take some freedom here and develop their own final speech and practice what they've learned when it comes to becoming wonderful rhetoricians. It's a great way to end their time here, I think. Just a reminder that grading policy is 90% summative assessments of learnings, 10% formatives. We are on that 6-point scale, which they have been on for the entirety, I think, of their English career here at Vista. Keeping in mind that the purpose of grades is to communicate the information about their achievement, let them really engage in self-evaluation. They do a lot of self-evaluation in this course. For pretty much every assignment, I ask them to first tell me, where do you think you are? Before I jump in and let them know where I think they are, so that we can engage in a conversation about their learning, which can be incredibly powerful. Grades also help us to identify groups of students for educational paths or programs. They are an incentive. We know this. And they also help us to evaluate the effectiveness of our own program. So the 6-point scale really helps us to achieve these goals in that we look at learning in description of the skills as opposed to simply numbers, percentages, or labels of assignments. So the rubric language goes from unsatisfactory to exemplary, or in the case of the language that they have developed, they go from not epic, Mr. Struggle, worm off the string, solid, bueno to epic as we go up those levels. And so while they might correspond to the traditional grade levels that we might think of, with that 5 and 6 being like the A+ level, if you do look at the percentages in the grade book, they're not going to make a ton of sense. So I really encourage students not to look at the percentages, just look at individual assignments and where you are on that individual target. The last thing I want to show you is my website, which I did send out in my email. If you're not getting my emails, please be sure that your email's correct on PowerSchool. This website gives you kind of an overview if you need it for anything in my course. I do have my course expectations here. This back to school night presentation will be down here as well. My contact information is on the website. And then I will also be posting our rubrics and our weekly overviews each week. I do film an overview and I'll be sending you kind of an update. You can always find those overviews on this website. So I encourage you to check out the website if there's anything that you are wondering about what your student is doing. That's a good place to start. And if you have questions for me, email is by far the easiest way to reach me. So please don't be afraid to send me an email at cray@fcusd.org. All right, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to a great term. Bye.